good morning, Canada. Welcome to the Rod Pedersen Show. And as the bumper showed you, if you're watching on Facebook Live, no Rod Pedersen today. I'm Darren DuPont. Rod is off to Vegas. I haven't checked his Instagram in the last 45 minutes to see where he is, but he's not here. He's gone to Vegas to hang out with the Golden Knights for a few days. So we'll hang out with you for a little bit. As you can see inside the bunker, we've got Pats legend Frank Kovacs joining us and the Silver Fox Kelly Rumpel. How are you guys doing?
Walking in, seeing him here?
Yeah, I could tell.
Couldn't be better.
I could tell.
Couldn't be better.
The same way. It's awesome. Thanks for having us.
This is what it's about. I mean, 5 minutes ago, you guys are on the phone with Dale Durkach, talking about his bobblehead and everything else. But that's cool, right? I mean, the hockey guys always stay together, right?
Well, that's true. It's a tight fraternity, isn't it, Frankie?
It sure is. And like myself, Dale Durkach, I grew up watching him play hockey, and he's kind of one of my role models playing hockey. And now he's a good friend of mine. I'm proud to say that. And he's such a good guy. And here he is. Here's his bobblehead.
He was trying to figure out a way that we could take the sweats off. Remember those old Cooperalls?
I know.
He says his kids bug him all the time about these Cooperalls. And then we were talking about the mullet. Well, that mullet isn't going anywhere. It's like a brick on there. The only thing we came to the conclusion we might be able to sort of scratch out that cheesy mustache that he had on that bobblehead.
Is there one actually on there?
Well, it's
There's
just
some peach
it's like
fuzz.
little fuzz. It's like it's almost like it was like dabbed on, painted on.
He's got that, but Wendell doesn't have the goatee. I thought Wendell would have the goatee.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if he had it back then, though. Did he?
I don't know.
I think he did, Sassoon.
Okay, did your paths cross, Frank?
No, not at all.
You missed by a year because what is there? He's 5 years older than you.
That's right. You bet.
So you would have just missed.
Just missed him.
Yeah. So that would have
Well,
been.
you would have idolized him probably as a kid, though. 'cause
Absolutely.
you could absolutely make an argument that Dale Durkach is the greatest Pat of all time.
Yep.
Like, of all time.
Yep.
In fact, I would challenge anybody to find one Pat ever that was better. Like, look, the numbers don't lie. Like, here's a guy that was putting up like 200 points a year. And I mean, that was a different time. I realized that.
Yeah.
Heartbreak. I remember I was about 13 or so. You and I are about the same age, aren't
Yeah.
we? I'm 47.
49.
49. So we're a couple years apart. So you'd have probably been maybe in grade when they were 12 seconds away in Game 6 from beating the Kamloops Blazers and going to the Memorial Cup.
Yeah.
And then they ended up coughing up a puck. They scored, and then they lost in overtime, and then they got beaten Game 7. So I think that haunts those guys to this day, Dale and Jamie Reeve and some of those guys on that team. But, like, I'm telling you, not to keep pumping Dale's tires, but there's never, I don't know. Can you think of anybody right off the top of your head
not at
over
all.
the years?
There's been some phenomenal players through the Pats organization over the years, but Dale's probably one of the best for sure. But there's been a lot of good players. We're talking Jock Callender, Dave Mikhailuk, Mike Cylinders, Eberle, obviously.
Ed Stanowski.
Ed Stanowski, and the list goes on. Back Clark Gillies.
Even to go back to like Billy Hickey and Fran
Yeah.
Huck, like if you want to go way back, that's a little before our time, obviously. In my time, he's the best.
He's the best.
Yeah.
The most storied franchise in junior hockey?
I would say.
I would say for sure.
It's up there, right? If it's not the most, it's up there for sure. So as you can tell, going to be a hockey show today. We're going to get into lots of hockey today. Joining us on the program will be Jamie Heward, former Pat as well, but long time in the NHL, and now he's with the Vancouver Giants as an assistant coach, trying to win a championship out on the coast. He won a title with the Swift Current Broncos as an assistant coach just a couple of years ago when they won the Western Hockey League title. So we'll have Jamie coming up a little bit later on in hour one, and further in hour two, we'll be joined by Winnipeg Ice General Manager Matt Cockle, former National Hockey League forward Kyle Wellwood. Find out what Kyle Wellwood's up to today. I haven't heard that name in a long time. Clark's on that one, booking Kyle Wellwood. So excited for that chat. And Global TV's Taylor Shire will be by in the bunker in hour two when these two adjourn. But I want to start in the National Hockey League, guys. One of the greatest things to see when I open up the NHL.com standings is to see Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary, all at the top of the Pacific Division, all in the playoffs. The Canucks won again last night, but the Oilers might be in the biggest trouble without Connor McDavid for 2 to 3 weeks. But how nice is it to see those three back in prominence in the Pacific. Did you guys expect that? Because I don't know that I did.
Go ahead, Kelly.
Well, to take it one step further, wouldn't Winnipeg and Toronto and Montreal also be?
They're all close. They're not in.
Like, we could have 6 or 7 this year, is my point, or 6 or something. Yeah, no,
Everybody but Ottawa.
Yeah, that's right. Now, there's lots of hockey to be played, but it could happen. And there's been years we haven't had any.
Yep.
So, like, to have, 5 or 6 Canadian teams would be great. To answer your question, I do think it's fantastic. I think it would be even more unbelievable if somehow, especially if it was Calgary, Edmonton, but even Vancouver, if there could be a Vancouver, Edmonton, or a Vancouver, Calgary. I think that would be incredible if they could play each other. Could you even imagine?
Well, we know that a Calgary-Edmonton series, that's on everybody's bucket list.
Well, for sure. I've been watching more this year than I have in other years for whatever reason. I've I guess maybe this Battle of Alberta thing's kind of tweaked my interest again. I'm really enjoying the hockey. I think that you're talking about in the 3 teams that we were starting out talking about, I think all 3 of them are good. I wonder sometimes though whether or not, like, you take the Flames as just as an example. They show flashes to me, as do the Oilers, of being really, really good, where I just think like these guys could beat almost anybody. But then they'll turn around in 3 of the next 4 games. They look like ham and eggers. There's something not quite right there. So I think all 3 of the teams that you just talked about are all pretty good teams, and I do think they'll all make the playoffs. Yet I hate to say things like this, but I just don't see any one of them having a long run. I just don't see it.
Yeah.
I think they'll get there. I think any one of the 3 of them could win a round or something like that. But do I see any one of Calgary, Edmonton, or Vancouver like playing in late May? I just don't see it. I just don't see the consistency. Yeah. The Oilers lack the depth. The Flames, I don't know what's going on there. I mean, Johnny Gaudreau has half the number of goals this year that he did last year. They kind of just don't seem like a playoff team to me.
They don't inspire a lot of confidence. Calgary falling 5-3 to LA last night. We know LA sitting in the basement of the entire National Hockey League. So Calgary 4-5-1 in their last 10 to fall out of third place. They're now even with Vegas at 64 points. Vegas, because of, I'm trying to think of whatever reason, they played the same number of games. Calgary has more wins, but Vegas listed 3rd in the Pacific behind Edmonton and Vancouver. Winnipeg 1 point back of Calgary and Arizona for the final wildcard spot. So Winnipeg's right there. And then in the East, Toronto holds down the 3rd spot in the Atlantic Division, but Montreal is 7 points out of a playoff spot. So I don't know that Montreal's going to be able to get there, but very conceivable that Winnipeg could find their way back into the playoffs. But
Toronto should, if they can continue to play some consistent hockey. That's their biggest question mark. How much do you watch?
I don't watch too much, unfortunately. I'm too busy with my kids and stuff. But I agree with you. I think hockey, when you think about hockey, it's hard to put a winning team together. Like, I can't imagine what goes behind the scenes of, budgets and salary caps and all this kind of stuff and making trades. It's got to be, you got to be pretty lucky. Yeah, there's a little skill there to kind of have some thought process to it, but it's not easy. Now, teams like Pittsburgh, they have superstars. These teams that have superstars, it helps a lot. Like guys like Crosby, Malkin, they help your team quite a bit to go along, like you were saying, in longevity in the playoffs. But sometimes that doesn't work out too. Like Washington Capitals for many years, they were just there. There's so much talent, but it just didn't work out. Finally, they won a cup after all those years. So these Canadian teams, they're all doing really good right now, like you're saying, but we'll see how far it goes.
I agree. I think you brought up a great point. It's so hard to, what's that little ingredient that you need to take you from being good to take you over the top, where now all of a sudden you're a really good playoff team. Yeah. And the thing with the Flames that I have to admit, Darren, I don't quite get, just to talk about them again, because I think I find myself pulling for them. I don't know why.
I know why. But anyways, continue.
I don't. Because for years I didn't really care.
Because you got friends over there.
Yeah, but then why haven't I cheered for them the last 4 or 5 years? I had the same friends there, right?
Okay.
But I mean, I just find myself really intrigued by what goes on there. But here's a question I want to throw at you. So, their managers over the years have seemingly identified the fact that their core group, like the Monahans and Bennett's and Goudreau's and Giordano, those guys are their core, right?
Yep.
Their core group. So we have to surround those guys with some grit and sandpaper because, it's not a square dance, right? You get to the playoffs and you need to have some of those mean guys. So they tried. I mean, they surrounded those guys with Travis Hamonic and Troy Brouwer and, James Neal and Milan Lucic. But has it really worked? Like, if you're on the outside looking in, you'd say they've kind of done what they should do. They haven't brought in like what the Oilers did for 100 years, and that's just keep bringing in, skilled guys. The Flames have done the opposite. They've made a special point of bringing in that sandpaper, but has it translated into any I watch them and they're great for 2 games and then they're okay for 2 games and then they're really good for 3 games and then they win 4 of their next 7 or they just can't. It doesn't translate in, and I don't see it changing this year either. I don't see that being a playoff team that's going to go on a long run.
Right.
I don't get it.
There's so much parity in the game. One of the things that's so cool about this, Frank, when you get in your first time in the bunker, is the Facebook wall. You can see it up on the left screen of our studio. Those are the comments coming in on the Facebook live feed. We can see them in real time and interact with the audience, which is really cool. Scott Nichols watching in Saskatoon, where it's minus 33. Good morning, Scott. You can see Jason Michael watching from Prince Albert saying good morning from the One Bridge City, a.k.a. Prince Albert. Okay. Robert Anderson's watching from the treadmill. Good morning, Robert. And so everybody's in on the Facebook feed this morning, and those listening live at rodpedersen.com and the Listen Live feed can join in the conversation on the Prairie Mobile text line this morning at 306-840-8777. We'll get to your comments on the text line throughout the show, or if you have questions for these two this morning. To the hockey point, there's so much parity in the game, and I don't know if this is directly related to the salary cap or just the increasing level of talent across the NHL. But I'm looking at the standings in the West, and I mean San Jose, who we've written off months ago as being a playoff team. I mean, they're only 12 points back of the playoffs. Now, 12 points today feels like an eternity. 10, 15 years ago, well, a couple of good weeks, and all of a sudden you're right back in the conversation. The margin of error is so small. You look at the Toronto Maple Leafs, who have been hot and cold, but with the firepower they have that they may not be a playoff team, there's just so much parity that the difference between being, in the top 3 or 4 of the conference and being in the bottom 3 or the 4 is not that big of a difference as it used to be. Is that good or bad for the game of hockey?
I think it's great for the game of hockey. That's what you want. You want every team to be right there, to be good competition. To have these big differences of a blowout to a very last place team that can't win a game, that's not good for hockey at all. That's not good for the fans or anything. But to have this type of a league, I think that's phenomenal. I think that's what you want.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, for me personally.
And how much of it?
Not everybody agrees with that, though.
No, but as you're thinking about it, how much of it is the salary cap and the level of talent, and then how much of it is adding the overtime and that extra point? Because there's a lot of teams and a lot of points that come in overtime, right? That don't translate to wins, which has some people begging for the 3-point game. Now,
yeah, get 3. If you win in regulation, you get 3 points, and don't get the same.
There's
number.
Always 3 points.
Yeah. You shouldn't get the
out.
same number of points for winning in a shootout, as an example, than you do if you win it in regulation. There's been that argument for a few years.
Yeah, I mean, it can make the standings and make things look a little bit deceiving. For example, look at Columbus, who's sitting in the first wild card spot at 30-17. They're 30, 17, and 10. But really, they're 30 and 27.
Yeah.
Right?
Losses.
They've lost 27 times. But it looks pretty spanky and pretty nice when you look at 30 and 17 and 10, right? There's 10 bonus points. But really, you're 30 and 27. So that's interesting. And it had me thinking about, actually the Saskatoon Blades games, who I still travel and do color commentary for on the radio broadcasts. They're playing the Regina Pats last week. And a game that Blades need a win. They got to get some points against non-playoff teams, move up in the standings. And that game is tied late in the hockey game. And the Blades are all over them, out shooting them 2-1, the whole deal. Do you pull your goaltender if it's a 3-point game in a tied hockey game?
No.
Right? So, but those things now come into play. It would change the game more than just adding a point to the standings. It would be very, very interesting.
Here's why the purists would never go for it, because you've got a million years of history, and now all of a sudden you're going to sort of now you could conceivably have teams that have 110 or 120 points. Because you're giving, every time you win in regulation, you get 3 points. People don't sort of like to dicker around with history, right? No. So I think that's why the purists would say, no, don't start getting into that, because then in the next 10 or 15 years, how do you compare this team with the Islanders or Oilers? If those teams would have had 3 points for a regulation win, they'd have had 140 points. Yeah. I'm being a little bit facetious, but I don't know. I don't ever see it happening. But I understand why people like it, but I just don't think you'll ever see it.
Interesting comment from Gord Archibald from Nuevo Vallarta, Mexico this morning. Lucky you. If Gordie Howe was the top player produced from Saskatchewan in the first half of the 20th century, who was the top player in the second half of the century? I'm trying to think the top of my head.
Gordie Howe was the top.
Basically, who's the best player from Saskatchewan, not named Gordie Howe? That would be my guess. That's a really good question.
That's a very good question.
Think about that during the break. We got to roll the rollout for Flooring Superstores this morning. The Prairie Mobile text line, again, is open at 306-840-8777. It is day 3 of CFL free agency. We have to talk a little bit of football, at least as far as free agency goes. There are a lot of big names, big household veteran names on the board, including, among others, Chris Randall, the defensive back, Caleb Hawley, Luke Tasker, Naaman Roosevelt, Armani Edwards, Sean Lemon, Derek Dennis, Darrell Walker. They're all still available. So the Capital Auto Mall Universal Collision Center daily poll question today pertains to CFL free agency. Of these 4, who are you most surprised hasn't signed yet? Clark, did we settle on the same 4? Darrell Walker, Derek Dennis, CJ Gable, and Sean Lemon.
Is this a trick question, or isn't one of those 4 kind of in a different class?
Darrell Walker?
Yeah.
Well, yes, but they're all different position groups. And Darrell Walker, people are understanding. I mean, with DeVere Posey and DeVaris Daniels going off for 200,000+ and all these big deals happening, the money's getting tight. So are you surprised that Darrell Walker's not around, or are you not because of the money? And he's going to have to shift his mentality, maybe take less money. Offensive lines continue to be a focus in the Canadian Football League. Have to have a good one. Derek Dennis still available. He's a former CFL lineman of the year. He's still available. Or do you look at a veteran like Sean Lemon or CJ Gable? Those 2 guys, Derek Dennis and Sean Lemon, have been very vocal on social media, wondering, where's the attention on us? They're not part of the conversation in terms of, Darrell Walker in a class of his own. So that's interesting.
Nor should they be.
There you go. So let's see if the poll results reflect that. As far as Kelly Rempel goes, I can safely assume you think it's going to be about 90% Darrell Walker.
Well, I mean, I'm just looking at it going like, it just seems like there's the one guy in that group of 4 that would, to me, be fairly obviously sort of like the most sought after and the more impact type of player. And that doesn't mean the other 3 aren't good. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that guy's an impact player, a game-changing type of player, I think.
Yeah.
But I don't know. That's just my opinion.
Jeff Michaels watching from Medicine Hat. Tip of the hat from Medicine Hat. High of +1 today. Yeah, okay. It's going to actually warm up today. It's supposed to get up to -11 in Regina, where Jamie Neugebauer is watching today. He thinks, is it not obviously Trottier? So best player from Saskatchewan. Others, Alan Lee says Regina's best NHL hockey player, Ryan Getzlaff. We'll talk about that and more on the other side.
What about Wendell Clark?
How about Wendell Clark?
I was going to say Wendell Clark. He's my favorite.
There you go. Yeah. How about Wendell Clark right there on the desk?
Yeah.
All right, the rollout for Flooring Superstores. We'll be back with more of the Rod Pedersen Show here on Facebook Live and listen live at rodpedersen.com.
You're watching Rod Pedersen On Demand. For more of the Rod Pedersen Show, visit rodpedersen.com or follow Rod Pedersen on social media.